Well, we're beginning tonight a study of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And 1st and 2nd Chronicles is obviously a critical historical book. In the Hebrew, it's named Divrei Ha-Yamim, which the words concerning the days, or in other words, it's a chronicle. And so it's counted in the Hebrew, in some of the Hebrew Bibles, as one book. 1st and 2nd Chronicles is really just a single book in many Bibles. When it was translated into Greek in the Septuagint, a couple of centuries before Christ's ministry, they called it in the Greek supplements because they viewed it as covering materials, the same materials as 1st and 2nd Kings, but from a little different vantage point. So they mentioned supplements. Jerome in his Latin Vulgate called it Chromicon, in other words, a chronicle. It's from that we get our English name for the book, 1st and 2nd Chronicles. 1st and 2nd Kings that we've been through already gives us the political history. 1st and 2nd Chronicles will give us a very similar history, but from a religious or priestly or Levitical point of view. So it will omit things that are not pertinent to that particular focus, but includes other things that the others don't have. So they form a history in a strange kind. It starts with Adam in a genealogical sense, goes through the death of Saul, just with fragmentary segments of a genealogy. And then it ends with the decree of Cyrus, the Persian, who frees them from the exile in 2nd Chronicles, the last verse, last chapter, in 538. So that's the span of time. In a broad sense, it starts with Adam up through Saul, but just in a cursory, just by laying out a genealogy, pretty much. But then from there on, it gets into a narrative that takes you all the way through the reign of David, through Solomon, and the Davidic kings right up until Jehoiakim and Coniah and the Babylonian captivity. David and Judah, the tribe of Judah, are the focal points. And that's why it comes from a priestly or Levitical point of view, but extolling David and his dynasty. It makes reference all through here to all kinds of books that have been lost. The book of the Annals of David, the book of the Kings of Israel and Judah, the book of the Kings of Judah, the book of the Kings of Israel, the Annals of the Kings of Israel, and on it goes. And there's many others that it makes reference to but have been lost through the centuries. Now the genealogies cover the first 9 chapters of the first book. The rest of 1st Chronicles will deal with the reign of David himself. 2nd Chronicles takes on the reign of Solomon for the first 9 chapters, and then deals with what I'll call the Davidic Dynasty, the succeeding kings all the way down to the point where they're into captivity. Let's take a look at it with our timeline. If you remember this from Learning the Bible in 24 Hours, where we lay out from the creation right to the present day. And Genesis, of course, covers that history for thousands of years right up to the Exodus. The rest of the Old Testament takes it from the Exodus to the exile, as Chronicles will. After that, there's a 400-year period they call the silent years, although they're pre-written. You can find the record of those silent years in Daniel, chapter 11, 5 through 35. Then we have the ministry of Christ, the diaspora, Israel restored, and brings us to the present day. But we're going to focus on this period of time called the monarchy, from Saul to the exile. Saul, David, Solomon, and those that followed. And so we have Samuel, who's the bridge between the judges and the monarchy, who brings you to the King Saul. Saul will be treated very briefly in Chronicles, you'll see. After Saul, of course, comes David, then Solomon. And then after Solomon, when he dies, there's the civil war where it breaks into 2 nations. The southern kingdom, we'll call it, of Judah, the northern kingdom of Israel. The northern kingdom goes from bad to worse pretty fast and gets wiped out totally in the Assyrian captivity or exile. The southern kingdom has a few good kings, but it drifts finally to the point where God judges them also into Babylon. There's a big difference. The northern kingdom has no respite. It's over as a nation. The southern kingdom would be also, except for the fact that God made a promise to David. So for David's sake, the southern kingdom goes into Babylon for a limited period, literally 70 years, whereupon they're released. So 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, 1 Samuel takes you up to David. 2 Samuel gives you the history of David. 1 Kings from Solomon up to a checkpoint where 2 Kings takes over. Elijah and Elisha are the two prophets that bridge that changeover from 1 Kings to 2 Kings. So that's a broad view. Chronicles is going to take, 1 Chronicles take the same period that 2 Samuel does, except very superficially. And then 2 Chronicles will take you from Solomon right up until the Babylonian exile. And again, you can almost look at it as a religious perspective rather than a political perspective. So we have 1 and 2 Samuel, then we have 1 and 2 Kings, and in some Bibles, of course, they're called 1 and 2, 3 and 4 Kings, but that's just a label after all. And Chronicles will be a recap, if you will, of the southern kingdom from the point of view of Judah. It says very little about the northern kingdom, its rival kingdom in a sense. So we have Samuel, Saul, and David in first book of Samuel, and we have David's triumphs, David's troubles in 2 Samuel. His triumphs at Hebron and at Jerusalem, but then all his troubles in this family and in the nation following. This is just by way of a survey review of books that you've already gone through. First book of Kings, we have King Solomon in his ascension, temple built. It takes it to the peak of the monarchy for 40 years. From chapters 12 on in 1 Kings, you have the divided kingdom. And for 80 years, it covers that, the accession of Rehoboam, and then the split, the civil war and the split in the two kingdoms. Second book of Kings is probably the most tragic narrative ever written. As these blessed kingdoms go down, as much as God has blessed them, they both deteriorate. Northern kingdom, we have the ministry of Elisha trying to repair things to the death of Jehu. Then there's some annals of both kingdoms leading up to the Assyrian captivity of the northern kingdom. And Judah, the southern kingdom. That in this period, Jonah, Amos, and Hosea are the prophets to the northern kingdom. And the southern kingdom, you have a whole fist of Obadiah, Joel, Isaiah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, and Jeremiah, all prophesy to the southern kingdom right up till the time that God brings them into captivity. Ends with, of course, the Babylonian captivity in Judah. But, of course, Chronicles is going to repeat that in a sense. I wanted just to give you that perspective from your previous studies. The first 9 chapters, we have basically a genealogy from Adam to Jacob, Jacob to David, David to Zedekiah, and then the tribal allotments. Starting at chapter 10 through the rest of 1 Chronicles, we'll talk about David, anointment, the ark of the Lord, his moving the ark to Jerusalem, and the covenant and the temple. When we get to 2 Chronicles, of course, it'll deal with Solomon and the building of the temple, and then Judah's history, right up to the exile, the deterioration of the kingdom there. Understand the difference between the northern and southern kingdom. The northern kingdom, which called itself the house of Israel, there were 19 kings that reigned for 250 years, 7 different dynasties. Everybody murdering each other and what have you, going from bad to worse, leading finally to where God uses the Assyrians to wipe them out. As a nation, obviously. They're taken into captivity, but they no longer exist as a nation. The southern kingdom is a little different. They had 20 kings that reigned for 370 years, so they lasted longer. The important thing to realize, it was one dynasty, Dynasty of David, and that's going to be one of the preoccupations, if you will, of the chronicler, is to give us the background and the ups and downs of the Davidic, of the house of David. And even there, it's going to go into captivity as a judgment, not as an obliteration, but with prophets pointing out to them that it's just for 70 years, that they have a promise of return, which, of course, God honored to the very day, by the way. And we'll be dealing with all of that as we get it. This will be our focus, will be the southern kingdom in this study. I'd like to talk, before we go any further, about a Dr. Robert Dick Wilson. In 1955, he was the head of Semitic languages in Princeton. He was able to read and write 45 ancient Semitic languages. That was his thing. When he was only 25 years old, he was fluent in 9 of those languages. He memorized the entire New Testament in Hebrew, every syllable, and many books of the Old Testament also. Over a period of 45 years, he was devoted to the Old Testament, accumulating, studying in all languages, tracking down all the archaeology that was in existence, all translations. He investigated every single consonant, in other words, every letter in the Old Testament. That's over 1.25 million letters that he analyzed thoroughly over many years, 45 years. Every version, every emendations of critics, all the notes of the Masoretes, every variation, manuscripts, version, and so forth. There are 29 kings listed in the Bible that are also found on ancient monuments. 195 consonants are involved, and these are located in 10 different countries. From the Old Testament, only 2 out of the 190 consonants ever were called into question. In the Old Testament, they are exactly as they are inscribed on the monuments, some of which are dated over 4,000 years old. The names are exactly the same, every letter clear and correct. In contrast to this record of the Bible, the greatest librarian at the major intellectual center of the old world, in Alexandria, in 200 BC, in 38 catalogs, only 2 or 3 names are recognizable. In Assyria, only 1 recognizable and not spelled correctly. Ptolemy, 18 kings, none of them intelligible. His conclusion, recently published in what is an expert by the Bible League Quarterly, says, I defy any man on the ground of evidence. There is not a page in the Old Testament about which you need have any doubt. Joe Fost, pastor at Calvary Chapel, Philadelphia, just chaired a 800 pastor conference, which included a review of the purity of the Bible. And he went at some length. I had to include some of the highlights of that thing, because the key point is, think about what that means, that we have in our lab something that's proven vastly more reliable than any of the secular records, even of the period back then. Well, let's get into it. 1 Chronicles chapter 1, the Patriarchal Genealogies. And this is the way it starts. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan. Now bear in mind, these are transliterations. So you'll, from Bible to Bible, even within the Bible, you'll find them sometimes transliterated slightly differently. But that's the transliteration issue that's going on in here, dealing with here. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons of Japheth, on he goes. You know, it's interesting. I can't resist. This is one of the most frustrating books to teach, because we have to find a path between 2 extremes. Going through this verse by verse, just reading the genealogies, is going to get pretty tedious on the one hand. On the other hand, behind most of these names are fabulous stories. So if we try to pick up the stories of even just the highlights, we'll never get through it. There's that much here. So the trick we're going to have to do is steer a path between the tedium of just reading these unpronounceable names in many cases, and on the other hand, going down all these rabbit trails it can lead to. So I picked a few things to touch on. Bear with me. But I can never miss the first 10 genealogies in the Bible, because many people always ask me, are there hidden messages in the Bible? And I always point out to them Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing, but it's the honor of kings, or duty of kings, to search out a matter. And here's a riddle. Who's the oldest man in the Bible? Well, obviously everyone will tell me Methuselah lived 969 years. Yet he died before his father. I love to throw this in a small study group in the neighborhood, because that causes people to scratch their head. How can Methuselah be the oldest man in the Bible, and yet he died before his father? That's because everybody forgets who his father was. And his father was Enoch, who didn't die. Right? He was translated. Enoch, at the age of 65, something happened in his life that altered his entire world, after which he walked with God for some 300 years. He was told that as long as his son was alive, the judgment of the flood would be withheld. The flood did not come as a surprise. It was preached on for 4 generations. But Enoch was told that as long as his newly born son is alive, the judgment of the flood would be withheld. So he named him Methuselah from 2 words, a Hebrew word, muth, which means death, and shalach, which is a verb meaning to bring or send forth. So Methuselah is a name that has within it the meaning his death shall bring or send forth. Now, if you do your homework in Genesis 5, you'll discover that when Methuselah was 187, he had a son by the name of Lamech. When Lamech was 182, he had a son by the name of Noah. And it was Noah's 600th year the flood came. In other words, the year that Methuselah dies is the year the flood came. In other words, his life was a prophecy. And whenever I talk about this, I'm always intrigued because I try to imagine what it would be like raising that kid as a child. Because every time he caught a cold, the entire neighborhood, of course, would take an interest and be panicked. So we have a genealogy in Genesis 5 that is paralleled here in 1 Chronicles. And I'm using this as an excuse just to get warmed up here. We have these 10 names: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. If there's all this hidden meaning in the name of Methuselah, what about these other 9 guys? Well, let's take a quick look at them. Adam comes from Adamah, which means man. Seth which is a Hebrew root meaning appointed. In fact, Eve even explains this in Genesis 4:25. She said, "For God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." That's why she named him Seth. He was appointed a replacement. He has a son by the name of Enosh, which is a Hebrew word meaning mortal, frail, or miserable. It comes from the root anash, which is usually used of a wound as being incurable and so on. He has a son by the name of Kenan, not Canaan as some Bibles have it, but it's Kenan. In fact, the Kenites, there's a pun on the Kenites that Balaam uses in Numbers and so forth. Anyway, Kenan can mean sorrow, dirge, or elegy. These are kind of grim names to go through school with, right? So when he has a son, he changed the pattern here a little bit. He names him a mouthful, but a fabulous name. Mahalalel, Mahal, which means the blessed or praised one, and El, the name for God. Mahalalel means the blessed or praised God. He has a son by the name of Yared. Now, Yared is a verb which means shall come down. And there's some reasons for this I'll spare going into here. Enoch we've mentioned, but what does his name mean? His name means, it's an academic term referring to commencement or teaching. And by the way, the oldest prophecy uttered by a prophet in the Old Testament was uttered by Enoch. Before the flood of Noah was a prophecy of the second coming of the Messiah. Enoch also the 7th from Adam, prophecy of these saying, "Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints to execute judgment upon all and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So his prophecy tells us that the Lord's coming is sure, that we know who will accompany him, that the purpose of his coming and the result of his coming. It's a very important prophecy. You'll find it in the book of Jude. Now, Enoch was translated, or raptured, if I can use that term, halfway between Adam and Abraham. Elijah was translated halfway between Abraham and Christ. So these 2 characters are well known to most of us that have studied the Old Testament. And so Enoch walked with God. Now, that was not a casual stroll. That lasted for 300 years. He did that, according to Hebrews 11. They were in agreement. He was surrendered to God, and he witnessed of him. And all the privileges he had are available to you and I today. Okay, so we talked about Methuselah. He was the next one. We've gone through all that. Lamech is his son. And here's a root that is not just in Hebrew, it's in English also, in our word lament or lamentation. The root in the Hebrew means despairing, or its equivalent. And then we have Noah. How many of you have heard of Noah in here? Okay, about 60%. That's not bad. Noah's name, 2-letter name, comes from Nacham, which means to bring relief or comfort, and comfort or rest, if you will. So here we are. We see this genealogy: Adam, Seth, Enosh, Kenan, Mahalalel, Yared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. Man, appointed, mortal sorrow. But blessed God shall come down, teaching that his death, whose death? God's death, shall bring the despairing comfort or rest. Now, there's no way you'll ever convince me that a group of Jewish rabbis contrived to hide a summary or précis of the Christian gospel in a genealogy in the Torah. No way. This also tells you that God's plan of redemption was not a knee-jerk reaction to being surprised by Adam's sin. The Trinity planned this before the foundation of the world, Ephesians 1:4. One instrument, the New Testament is in the Old Testament concealed. And the Old Testament is in the New Testament revealed. Now, for most of you that have been through our Learn the Bible in 24 Hours, this is by way of review, but I had to start with a warm-up here. And at this point, let's take a look. Let's go on now. So, the sons of Japheth. We've got three sons, Ham, Shem, of Noah. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Let's take Japheth first. Sons of Japheth, Gomer and Magog and Madai and Yavan and Tubal and Meshech and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah. This suddenly plunges us into the material of Genesis 10, called the Table of Nations to most of us. And we have Noah's three sons. And Japheth had Gomer, Magog, Madai, Yavan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. And from that we have the nations, Herodotus and Plutarch and so forth, talk about Gomer as the ancestor to the Sumerians, who settled along the Danube and the Rhine, Ashkenaz, Rephath. Strange as it may seem, the name Europe may have come from Rephath. The Togarmah, the Armenians, Turkey, Turkestan. Also Magog, the Scythians. We'll talk a lot about them as we face the reality of the impending invasion of Israel by the Magogians or the Scythians. Hesiod, the Greek didactic poet, makes this clear. Herodotus, there's other, we won't get into all of that here. Madai, or the Medes, known today mostly as the Kurds, emerged about the 10th century in a coalition with Persia to the 7th century. And then we have Tubal, Meshech. These are all Turkish or Greek roots here that we're talking about. Let's move on to Japheth. We have Gomer, Ashkenaz, Rephath, and Togarmah, and Yavan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dedanim. Well, that's the Japheth drawing. Let's take a look at Ham, the other son, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And Mizraim is Upper and Lower Egypt. Cush is Ethiopia, and also the Kassites, everything east of Assyria in that sense. They settled primarily south of the second cataract of the Nile, which is generally that's identity. This, of course, leads to Nimrod, the first world dictator. And then west of Egypt, Put, what we consider as North Africa. And then Canaan, Sidon, to Gaza, Sodom and Gomorrah, and all that. And Kitteh and the Sinites, which lead to Far East, strangely enough. And then we have Shem. Now you'll discover the Chronicle is most concerned, these other incidental to its purpose, is Shem, because from Shem will come Abraham, and from that will come David. So we have Shem, who gives rise to Elam, Ashur, Aphaxad, Lud, and Aram. And so as we go through all of these, in the days of Peleg, when the earth divided, some people think that may be a reference to continental drift. Others think it has to do with the division of the languages, whichever. But in any case, it's from Peleg that we have a string that finally leads to Terah, the father of Abraham. So that's the thread that the Chronicle is primarily concerned with, and you'll discover the Bible, most of the Bible is written as a preservation of the Messianic line. You'll see plots and counterplots and all kinds of shenanigans as Satan tries to wipe out the Messianic line, and God always obviously outsmarts him. And so it can be viewed as a drama in just those terms. Now, if we go through and list all of these, you'll discover that in Shem there are 26 nations. Under Ham there are 30. Under Japheth, 14. That adds up to 70. It's interesting that there are 70 nations from Noah. There's also 70 families that enter Egypt. It's interesting how the Bible seems to put in juxtaposition the Gentiles and his chosen people, and it's in both cases in 70 divisions. I think that's interesting. We tend to think of the chosen people as one of many, many different threads. The biblical point of view, it counts for half of them, in a sense, not maybe in numbers, but in significance, and more than that in significance. Well, moving on then in Chronicles, the sons of Yavan were Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, and Danannim, sons of Ham, Cush, Mitzrayim, Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush, Zeba, Havilah, Sabata, Ramah, Saptakah. And the sons of Ramah, Sheba, and Dedan, which are basically Saudi Arabia. And Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be mighty upon the earth. This is where Nimrod is the first world dictator, and one that deserves a lot of our attention because he may be in many ways, more ways than most people realize, a foreshadowing of the final world dictator. Mitzrayim is Egypt. Mitzrayim begot Ludim, Anamim, Lehabim, Naphtubim, and Pathrusim, and Kazlubim, of whom came the Philistines and the Caphthorim. And Canaan begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth, and the Jebusite also, and the Amorite, and the Girgasite, and the Hivite, and the Archite, and the Sinite, and the Arvite, and the Semirite, and the Hamathite. Many of these are the tribes that will occupy Canaan and will occupy our concerns all through Joshua and Judges and following. There's one name here you might notice, the Sinite. It's the term from which we get the term from which China, the study of China gets Sino-Russian relationships. It's a prefix of the Chinese, the Far Easterners. The sons of Shem, Elam and Asher, and Arphaxad, and Lud, and Aram, and Uz, and Hul, and Gether, and Meshech. And Arphaxad begot, he's the important one to us, begot Shelah, and Shelah begot Eber. And some people think that Hebrew may be from Eber. Some feel it's those that crossed the river. I won't go down that path here. In any case, under Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, because in his days the earth was divided. And his brother's name was Yoktan. And Yoktan begot Almadad, and Sheleph, and Hazar Maveth, and Zerah, and Yerah, I should say. Hadoram also, and Uzal, and Diklah, and Ebal, and Abimael, and Sheba, and Ophir, and Havilah, and Yobab. All of these were the sons of Yoktan. Shem, Arphaxad, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Zerg, Nahor, Terah, Abram. The same is Abraham. He obviously gets his name changed in Genesis 17 or wherever. Shem is the important one for you and I because we have Persia. Out of Arphaxad comes, of course, the line that we're interested in. Aram is, in effect, is Syria, if you will. Aramaic comes from Aram, if you will. But, of course, Abraham will constitute the chronicler's focus as we go further. The sons of Abraham, Isaac and Ishmael. It's interesting that they're in that order. That's not the order they were born. Be careful of biblical orders here. And these are generations. The firstborn of Ishmael takes Ishmael first to get him out of the way, so to speak. Ishmael, Nebaioth, then Kedar, Abdil, and Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Masa, Hadad, and Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These are the sons of Ishmael. There's 12 of them, just as there will be 12 to Jacob. And Abraham is our key player so far, mentioned 74 times in the New Testament. He's venerated by all three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All venerate Abraham. He has distinctive titles in the Scripture, the father of the faithful in Hebrews 11, the friend of God in James 2, and so on. His father was Terah, and Terah had Abram, Nahor, Haran, and a daughter by the name of Sarai. And Abraham marries his sister. So when he passes her off as his sister rather than his wife, he's only half lying. But of course he's misleading, so he's guilty of lying, but still many people overlook the fact that yes, she also was his sister. And he has, of course, two sons, Ishmael and Isaac. Nahor is going to have Bethuel, Uz, Buz, Kemuel, Kesed, Hazo, Bildash, and Yedlaf. Haran is going to have Milcah, Iskar, and one by the name of Lot. And you recognize that Lot, thus, is a nephew of Abraham. That's going to become important later on. Bethuel has Rebekah and Laban. And obviously Isaac is interested in Rebekah, but he ends up getting, from her, he gets Esau and Jacob. Esau is going to be the perpetual enemy of Jacob. It'll even start inside the womb. Bethuel has a son by the name of Laban who has two daughters, Leah and Rachel, and those are the two that Jacob, of course, will have his eye on and ultimately marry both of them. And Lot has two sons by incest, Moab and Ammon. So that's the picture of Terah's family. And so we have, let's take another look at the descendants of Abraham. He has Isaac by Sarah. He has Ishmael by Hagar. Under Keturah, he has a whole string of them: Zimran, Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. From Jokshan, we have Sheba and Dedan, commonly associated with Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. And under Midian, there's a whole other list of them. The point is, the Sheba and Dedan of Saudi Arabia, these others under Midian are the Bedouins. Now, what's interesting about these is that all of these trace themselves back to Abraham, but through Keturah, not through Sarah, and or even Hagar for that matter. Now, it's going to get a little more complicated because under Ishmael, he has his 12 sons. Esau strikes out pretty early to abandon he not only sells his birthright, but he deliberately, to offend his parents, takes wives of the Ishmaelites. And so the Edomites, or the Esau descendants, and the Ishmaelites commingle. So strangely enough, no one with any real certainty can truly trace his lineage back to Ishmael. They like to make those claims, but it turns out it ain't that easy. They're commonly called in the press Arabs, but that's again a misnomer. They may or may not have anything to do with the Arabic ethnic background or the geography of the Arabian Peninsula. But let me just put a caution flag there. When you use that term, realize that most people are probably misusing it. Let's talk about the wives. Let's take these by wives. Now the sons of Keturah, Abraham's concubine, she bears Zimran, Yoksam, Midian, Ishbak, Shua, and these are the sons of Yoksam, Sheba, and Dedan. And the sons of Midian, Ephah, Epher, and Enoch, and Abida, and Eldah, and all these are the sons of Keturah. I thought the charts are easier to follow than the text, but let's go on. And Abraham begot Isaac. The sons of Isaac were Esau and Israel, using the preferred name here. The sons of Esau were Eliphaz, Reuel, Jeush, Yalam, and Korah. Sons of Eliphaz, Teman, Omar, Zephi, Gatam, Kenaz, and Timnah, and Amalek. The Amalekites are going to be very important downstream, but in any case, when you're talking about the sons of Esau, you're talking about generally are the virulent adversaries of Israel. The sons of Reuel were Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Missa. The sons of Seir, Lotan, Shobal, and Zibeon, and Anna, and Dishbon, and Ezer, and Dishan. The sons of Lotan, Hore, and Homan, and Timnah was Lotan's sister. The sons of Shobal were Elian, Manahath, and Ebal, Shephi, and Onan. And the sons of Zibeon, Aya, and Anna. The sons of Anna, Dishon. The sons of Dishon, Amram, Ishban, Ithran, and Haran. The sons of Ezer, Bilhan, Zaban, and Yoktan. The sons of Dishon, Uz, and Aran. All these are the kings that reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the children of Israel. Bela, the son of Beor, and the name of his city was Dinhabah. And when Bela was dead, Jobab, the son of Zerah of Basra, reigned in his stead. And when Jobab was dead, Husham, the land of the Temanites, reigned in his stead. And when Husham was dead, Hadad, the son of Bedad, which smote Midian in the field of Moab, reigned in his stead. And the name of his city was Avith. And when Hadad was dead, Samlah of Masrekah reigned in his stead. And when Samlah was dead, Shaul of Rehoboth by the river reigned in his stead. And when Shaul was dead, Baal-Hanan, the son of Achbor, reigned in his stead. And when Baal-Hanan was dead, Hadad reigned in his stead. The name of his city was Bai, and his wife's name was Mehetabel, and the daughter of Matred, the daughter of Mesahab. Hadad died also. The dukes of Edom were, and there's 10 of them, or 11 of them, Duke Timnah, Duke Eliah, Duke Yedith, Duke Aholibamah, Duke Elah, Duke Pinon, Duke Kenaz, Duke Teman, Duke Mitzbar, Duke Migdal, Duke Imran. These are the dukes of Edom. Anyone want me to read those again? I sure hope not. I don't think I could do it twice in a row. But anyway, The dukes or the leaders of Edom are adversaries. Okay, let's go to chapter 2. It's going to get more interesting. We're going to jump into specifically the genealogy of Judah. That's our primary target here anyway. These are the sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. The sons of Judah were and Onan and Shelah, which three were born unto him of the daughter of Shua the Canaanitess. And the firstborn of Judah, was evil in the sight of the Lord. He slew them. We're going to discover that all three of these boys do not provide issue that God is interested in. Very strange things going on here. Let's back up and take up these 12 patriarchs. Refresh our memory here. Abraham, of course, had Sarah, and Hagar, of course, had Ishmael. But under Sarah, he had Isaac, and with Rebekah, had two, Esau and Jacob. Again, we'll follow the main line here. Jacob had two wives, Leah and Rachel. And Leah bore four: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Rachel, being barren, figured she resorted to a procedure that was common in those days to give her handmaid as her surrogate, Bilhah, and through that has Dan and Naphtali. Leah figures, gee, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander, I guess. So she gives her handmaid, Zilpah, to Jacob, through whom we have Gad and Asher. By this time, Rachel bears. She has Joseph. And so here's Jacob's with the son of the one he loved Rachel more than life itself. So you can tell right away Joseph, not only because he's the youngest, but he's also from Leah, gets very favored treatment. You know the story of Joseph. Meanwhile, Leah bears a couple more, Issachar and Zebulun. And Rachel, although she dies in childbirth, provides Benjamin. So there you have the 12. And it would be simple except for the fact Joseph, when he rises to prime minister of the known world at that time, he has two children from his Egyptian wife, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they get adopted by Jacob as his sons. So Jacob really has a group of 13 to choose from, because you've just split Joseph into two halves, so to speak. So recognize that when you read your Bible, because you'll often see all 12 listed with one missing. And you don't have 11, you still have 12 with one missing. How'd they pull that off? With the baker's dozen. There's 13 to choose from. So there's times that Levi is not mentioned because they don't go to war, but you still have 12 tribes going to war. Follow me? I'll show you some surprising ways before this thing is over. Anyway, they're the famous 12 tribes. Leah had her four. Each one's name has a meaning. Reuben, behold a son. Simeon means heard. Each one of these are results of prayer in their birth. And you want to learn those names. They're in the margin of most of your study Bibles because these tribes are listed. Let me get through these. Bilhah has two, then Zilpah has two, Leah has a couple more, then Rachel has her two. The story of Tamar is a strange, sordid little story tucked in Genesis 38. Genesis 37 introduces Joseph, and the rest of the book of Genesis from 37 to 50 is this incredible drama of Joseph as he gets sold into Egypt, rises to become prime minister of the world and all that. Right in the middle of all this, or not middle of the second chapter of this, there's a strange episode where Tamar, because she was denied her husbands from Judah, poses as a prostitute, gets impregnated, unknowingly gets impregnated. He unknowingly impregnates her, thinks she's a prostitute, not knowing, and so she has, she's his daughter-in-law. So through her father-in-law, she has two sons, Pharez and Zerah. And so they're considered sons of Judah, strangely. And what God is doing here is he's preserving the Messianic line, strangely enough. And anyway, so Tamar has these twins, Pharez and Zerah. And Pharez is going to be very important to us as we go. The sons of Pharez were Hezron and Hamul, and the sons of Zerah was Zimri, Ethan, Himal, Calcol, and Dara, 5 of them in all. And the sons of Carmi, Achar, the troubler of Israel, who transgressed in the thing accursed. There's Midrashic legends that from Zerah, not Pharez, the other guy, will ultimately come Rachel. So she may have a linkage in here too, at least in legend. Moving on, and the sons of Ethan were Azariah, the sons of Hezron were born unto him, Jerahmeel, and Ram, and Chelubai. And Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nahshon, and the prince of the children of Judah, and Nahshon begot Salma, and Salma begot Boaz. Salma begot Boaz by marrying Rachel, incidentally. Now, it's incidental to the chronicler's purpose, but it's an interesting thing to understand that Boaz's mother was a Moabite. Anyway, and Boaz begot Obed, and Obed begot Jesse. And this little string is going to be very important to us in a minute. When you get to Genesis 38, that's the strange chapter we find inserted in the story of Joseph. And if you look at it in the Hebrew, remember Hebrew goes from right to left. At 49 letter intervals, we find the name of Boaz. Well, that might be just a statistical accident, except we continue at 49 letter intervals, we get the name of Ruth. And if you continue in this, you'll find at 49 letter intervals the name Obed. And then at 49 letter intervals, you find the name Yishai or Jesse. And then you find at 49 letter intervals the name of David. Now let's add this up. You have encrypted in the text itself the name of Boaz, Ruth, Obed, Jesse, and David. All in 49 letter intervals and all in chronological order. The chances of this just occurring as an accident of language is 1 chance in 70 million. It's been estimated. I think that's kind of interesting to discover that David's genealogy is encrypted in the books of Moses long before Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and the time of David. Centuries before, they're embodied here. That also implies that God gave the Torah letter by letter. There's a strange prophecy when Ruth and Boaz get married. At their wedding, someone says, "Let your house be like the house of Pharez, who Tamar bare unto Judah of the seed which the Lord shall give of this young woman." Well, if you know the story of Pharez and Tamar, and someone said that at your wedding, you'd say, "Same to you, fella." But you see, it's not a toast, it's a prophecy. You have to know that in the Torah, a bastard cannot enter into the congregation until the 10th generation. In other words, for 10 generations, he cannot inherit. When you take a look at Pharez's genealogy, the 10th generation from Pharez is, guess who? David. So there again, in the last few verses of chapter 4 of Ruth, which is in the time of the Judges, we have David prophesied again in the text. In the text. Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. It's interesting to notice how it's always the 10th man that seems to be so important. Noah was the 10th man, Abraham's the 10th from Noah, and Boaz is the 10th from Abraham. Now, I don't know what you do with that piece of information. But I get fascinated when I see fingerprints of the Holy Spirit on the text. These are clearly objects of deliberate design, not accidents. That's the main point I want to leave you with. Okay, let's continue. Boaz begot Obed, Obed begot Jesse, Jesse begot his firstborn Eliab, and Abinadab the second, Shema the third, Nethaneel the fourth, Radai the fifth, Ozem the sixth, David the seventh. David the seventh. Okay, that's the 7 sons, and he's the youngest, obviously. Whose sisters were Zeruiah and Abigail, and the sons Zeruiah and Abishai and Joab and Asahel. 3. Boaz and David. That's the linkage. Abigail bare Amasa, and the father of Amasa was Jether the Ishmaelite. Caleb, the son of Hezron, begot children of Azubah, his wife, and of Jerioth, and her sons were these, Yeser, Shobab, and Arden. And when Azubah was dead, Caleb took unto him Ephrath, and bare him Hur, and Hur begot Uri, and Uri begot Bezaleel. Now you'll notice some of these names are the same as geographical names. Bethlehem Ephrathah is a name that rings in our ears because of the Christmas cards. But there was a person by the name of Ephrathah. And often these names in geography will get confused. So do the tribal names. When you speak of me as, say, for example, I'm in Idaho now, but I came from California. He was a Californian. Does that mean I have an ethnic link to California? Not necessarily. It just means I came from there geographically. the tribes themselves will give their names to the places where they're allotted, but as time goes on, that region carries the tribal name independent of who happens to be living there. Because as time's going on, they're no longer confined. If you're from Ephraim, you may or may not be of the tribe of Ephraim in later years. And many people get confused. They assume that when these territories are conquered, that everybody that is conquered is from that tribe, not necessarily. We're going to get into that very much in Chronicles later, because there's a lot of strange myths that arise from these misunderstandings. Moving on, verse 21. And afterward Hezron went into the daughter of Machir, the father of Gilead, whom he married when he was 80 years old, and she bare him Segub. 80, that's getting on, 60 years? And Segub begot Jair, who had 23 cities in the land of Gilead. And he took Gesher and Aram and the towns of Jair from them, and Kenath and the towns thereof, even the 80 cities. All these belonged to the sons of Machir, the father of Gilead. And after the Hezron was dead in Caleb-Brephrathah, then Abiah, Hezron's wife, bare him Asher, the father of Tekoa, and the sons, that's where, remember, Amos came from, that area. The sons of Jerahmeel, and the firstborn of Hezron were Ram, the firstborn, Bunah, and Oren, and Ozem, and Ahijah. And Jerahmeel also had another wife whose name was Atara, and she was the mother of Onam. And the sons of Ram, the firstborn of Jerahmeel, were Maz, Yamin, and Eker. And the sons of Onam were Shimei and Yada, and the sons of Shimei, Nadab, and Abashur. The name of the wife of Abashur was Abihail, and she bare him Aben and Molid. The sons of Nadab, Seled, Apim, but Seled died without children. The sons of Apim, Ishi. The sons of Ishi, Sheshan, and the children of Sheshan, Ahlai. The sons of Yada, the brother of Shimei, Jether, Jonathan, and Jether died without children. Sons of Jonathan, Beleth, and Yaza, and these were the sons of Jerahmeel. Now Sheshan had no sons but daughters, and Sheshan had a servant, an Egyptian, whose name was Yarha. And Sheshan gave his daughter to Yarha, his servant, to wife, and she bare him Attai. And Attai began Nathan, and Nathan begot Zebad. But be on your guard, there are a lot of Nathans in the stories. There's prophets Nathans, there's sons of David named Nathan. Realize that some of these names are not very distinctive in that sense. And Zabad begot Ephalal, and Ephalal begot Obed, and Obed begot Jehu, and Jehu begot Azariah, and Azariah begot Helez, and Helez begot Eliashah, and Eliashah begot Sisamai, and Sisamai begot Shalom, and Shalom begot Yechemiah, and Yechemiah begot Elishama, and the sons of Caleb, the brother of Jerahmeel, were Mesha, his firstborn, which was the father of Ziph, and the sons of Marishah, the father of Hebron, and the sons of Hebron, Korah, Tapua, Rechem, and Shema. And Shema begot Raham, the father of Yorkharam, and Rechem begot Shimei. You know, this can sound pretty tedious, but we're actually going through a family tree from Adam all the way. So it's astonishing that this is all linked. I might warn you too, though, there are, when it says the sons, or the father of, they have no label for a grandfather or grandson. So there are even more generations than we're reading, because in many cases the chronicler has skipped a few, highlighting those that he regards as relevant. So while this is tedious to us, because most of them are unfamiliar to us, you need to realize also in these there are still links that are unrecorded here. Anyway, Ephah, Caleb's concubine, bare Haran, Moza, and Gazez, and Haran begot Gazez, and the sons of Yadai, Regem, and Yothan, and Geshan, and Pelet, and Ephah, and Shaph, and Machah, Caleb's concubine, bare Sheba, and on it goes. She bare also Sha'af, the father of Madmanah, and Sheba, the father of Machbenah, and father of Gibeah, and the daughter of Caleb was Achsah. These were the sons of Caleb, the son of Hur, the firstborn of Ephratah, Shobal, the father of Kiriath Jearim, and Salma, the father of Bethlehem. See, Bethlehem was a person's name. Hareph, the father of Beth Gibron. Of course, that gives that name to a town. And Shobal, the father of Kiriath Jearim, and sons, and Hareth, and half of the Manathahites. The families of Kiriath Jearim, the Ithrites, the Puhites, the Shumathites, and the Mishrites, and of them the Zerethites, and the Ishtaulites. Wow. The sons of Salma, Bethlehem, and the Neophilites, and Ataroth, and the house of Joab, and half the Manorites, these Zorites. And the families of the scribes which dwelled at Jabez, the Teraites, the Shemaites, the Sukathites, and these are the Kenites that came from Hemath, the father of the house of Rechab. Okay. One more to go through. Okay. 1 Chronicles chapter 3. This is the genealogy of David. We're getting to the pay dirt here. Now these are the sons of David which were born unto him at Hebron. The firstborn Anan of Ahinoam the Jezreelitess. The second Daniel of Abigail the Carmelitess. The third Absalom the son of Maachah, the daughter of Talmai king of Geshur. And fourth Adonijah the son of Haggith. And the fifth Shephatiah of Abital. And the sixth Ithream by Iglah his wife. These six were born unto him in Hebron, and there he reigned 7 years and 6 months, and in Jerusalem he reigned 33 years. These were born to him in Jerusalem: Shimei, Shobab, and Nathan, and Solomon, 4 of Bathshua, the daughter of Amiel. Bathsheba, that's another treatment of Bathsheba, obviously. Ithbar also, and Elishama, and Eliphalet, and Nogah, and Nepheg, and Yaphia, and Elishama, and Eliada, and Eliphalet, 9. These were all sons of David, besides their sons of concubines, and Tamar, their sister. And Solomon's son was Rehoboam. Abiah his son, Asa his son, Jehoshaphat his son, Jehoram his son, Ahaziah his son, and Joash his son, and Amaziah his son, Azariah his son, Jotham his son, Ahaz his son, Hezekiah his son, Manasseh his son, Ammon his son, Josiah his son. That's your dynasty. We're going to be going through those kings as they take their shot at it. And the sons of Josiah were the firstborn of Johanan, the second Jehoiakim, and the third Zedekiah, and the fourth Shallum. Now, Ahaz has Hezekiah and Manasseh. Ahaz is bad news. Hezekiah was a breath of fresh air. Manasseh was a disaster. And that's going to be important to understand when we get there. As you get through these others after Josiah, one of these is Jehoiakim, and he has a son, a brother by Zedekiah, and Jehoiakim is going to have Jehoiachin, and he's going to have, well, here we go. Here are the sons of Jehoiakim: Jeconiah, his son, or also called Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah, his son. There's a lot of confusion. It's easy to get mixed up. Jeconiah and Jehoiachin are this. Jeconiah is also called Coniah. We're going to talk about him in a minute. And his son Zedekiah, his son. So there's 2 Zedekiahs, you'll notice. Okay. Generation apart. And the sons of Jeconiah, Asher, Salathiel, his son, Malchiram, also Pedaiah, and Shenazar, and Jechemiah, Hoshama, and Nedabiah. And the sons of Pedaiah were Zerubbabel and Shimei, and the sons of Zerubbabel, Meshullam, Hananiah, Shelomith, their sister. The Zerubbabel is going to be a key player. We've got Jeconiah is going to be a key player to us. Zedekiah we're going to talk about. Pedaiah is going to call, and the fact that Pedaiah is the father of Zerubbabel, according to the chronicler. Well, we're going to take a look at that in a minute. Hashabah, Ophel, and Berechiah, and Hasadiah, and Yusha, Beshed, 5. And the sons of Hananiah, Pelatiah, and Jesiah, and the sons of Rephaiah, and the sons of Arnan, the sons of Obadiah, and the sons of Shechaniah, and the sons of Shechaniah were Shemaiah, and the sons of Shemaiah, Hattush, and Igal, and Bariah, and Neariah, and Shaphat, 6 of them. And the sons of Neariah, Elionai, and Hezekiah, and Azrikam, 3. And the sons of Elonai were Hodiah, and Elishib, and Beliah, and Akub, and Johanan, and Deliah, and Anani, 7. Okay. We glossed over some difficulties. Zerubbabel, in verse 19, is elsewhere called the son of Shealtiel, not the son of Pedaiah. He's presented as the son of Pedaiah in the text we just read. But in Ezra 3 and 5 and Nehemiah 12 and Haggai 1 and 14 and Matthew and Luke, he is presented as the son of Shealtiel, not the son of Pedaiah. We got a problem here. Boy, the critics can start sharpening their knives. See, the Bible's got contradictions. Maybe. Whenever you find, by the way, a little trick, every time you find what apparently is a contradiction, rejoice. Because God always rewards the diligent, because behind these apparent contradictions or problems is usually a discovery. So let's hold judgment. A second problem is that in Luke's genealogy, he identifies Shealtiel as the son of Neri, whose descent is not from Solomon at all. The third problem is that in Zerubbabel's line, the chronicler lists Zerubbabel's 7 sons and 1 daughter. And none of them appear in the genealogies of either Matthew or Luke. Those are some discrepancies. There are lots of other little discrepancies, but they're really trivial things of spelling and minor. But these are, what's interesting about these difficulties is the commentators don't quite agree. They all speculate, and many of them have missed the whole point. And let me show you what I mean. Understand these kings of David. After he dies, Solomon, after Solomon dies, the place splits. The dynasty of David goes from bad to worse, with a couple of exceptions, Hezekiah and Josiah, a couple of exceptions. It finally gets so bad that in the days of Jeconiah, also called Coniah, we have this interesting blood curse recorded in Jeremiah 22:30. Jeremiah records, "Thus saith the Lord, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days. For no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah." That's quite a sentence. And that creates a fascinating problem. If you look at it spiritually, you can visualize Satan and his gang throwing a party. Because they must read this and figure God has shot himself in the foot, as we might say. Because God is committed to bringing the Messiah from the royal line of David. The next one on the royal line of David is Jeconiah. And on Jeconiah, God pronounces a blood curse. Write this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. So how do you get out from under this one? What you might want to do sometime is take this verse to a serious rabbinical scholar. Anyone that you know that takes any Jewish person that takes the Tanakh, the Old Testament, seriously, and ask him, what do you do with this verse? The Messiah has to come from the royal line, right? Right. How can he come from the royal line if there is a curse pronounced on that very line? What do you do with that? He's also, by the way, called Jehoiachin. Those are the different names for the same guy. Well, we'll take that up in the next session. We'll give you a week to think about it. So during this week, resolve the difficulties that we've just listed for chapter 3, and then go ahead and read the remainder of the genealogical section of the book, chapters 4 through 9.